Liberties Defense Center. She's part of Daniel McGowan's defense team. She's joining us from Eugene, Oregon by DN video stream. In New York, we're joined by Kathy Manley, an attorney for Yassin Aref. Lauren Regan, let's begin with you. Describe Daniel McGowan's situation at the prison. Exactly where is he?
Well, he is in the CMU in Marion, Illinois. He was literally snatched in the middle of the night from a federal prison in Sandstone, Minnesota, and was never given any reason why he was transferred there. He had just completed his 6-month prison review, and they gave him complete exemplary reviews. He was a model inmate. And interestingly, Daniel really had no prior convictions at all. Normally, he would have been qualified for a very low or minimum security prison. He had no violence or any problems in the prison system, and he wasn't convicted of any terrorist crime or being affiliated with a terrorist organization, other than the government's claim that he was affiliated with the Earth Liberation Front.
I'm looking at a piece in the Eugene Weekly. It says in a letter that Daniel McGowan wrote to you, the prisoners refer to the unit as Little Guantanamo and speculate when the real Guantanamo closes, some of the prisoners will be sent to Marion. Lauren.
Yes, that's correct. The inmates there do call Marion, Illinois, Little Guantanamo. Part of the reason that they call it that is because it is a secret facility. They do feel as if they are being hidden not only from society at large, but from other inmates in the federal system. As well, as Will mentioned, their lives within the prison are extremely different from even those that are being sanctioned or punished for violent actions while in prison. There is an incredible amount of barbed wire. Daniel has actually said that in seeing pictures of Guantanamo, the unit where he's being housed is actually more fortified than the photos of Guantanamo. And just to give you an example, normally prisoners in the federal system have access to recreation yards and all sorts of outdoor activities, but at Little Guantanamo there are 4 cages that they are allowed out into for a very short time period each day. The cage has a basketball hoop, and that's about the extent of their recreation time. Also sort of hearkening to a Guantanamo-type existence. And the other similarity, of course, is like the people in Guantanamo Bay, these individuals have no understanding of what they did to get themselves into the CMU and what they can do to get out of it. Normally, when a prisoner is being disciplined for something they did wrong, they are able to earn their way out of that disciplinary unit. Even those that are being held in Florence, Colorado, the most violent prison in America, if they, conduct themselves for 1 year with good behavior, they can go back into a general unit. But as far as we know right now, Mr. McGowan will serve the remainder of his sentence in this facility because we can't find any mechanism to challenge his designation there, which will be part of a future litigation.
Is Daniel McGowan allowed to grant any interviews from prison? Has he done any media interviews?
Well, we've attempted. There have been several requests by media to conduct both print and film interviews, and all of them have been denied. And as far as we know at this time, the warden at that unit is indicating that they will not permit any contact. And in fact, even his attorney calls to me are greatly restricted. I'm only allowed to speak with him on the phone if we have an imminent upcoming court hearing. Otherwise, I have to write to him, and we've already had one letter, attorney-client privilege letter, opened by the prison and read, and they made comments on legal strategy that I was sending to him. So there's a bunch of problems.
Kathy Manley, Tell us about the case of Yassin Aref, exactly where and how he's being held right now, what communication he is able to have with the outside world.
Okay, well, first I'd like to say that Yassin really loves this show. He was able to listen to it when he was in solitary confinement in Rensselaer County Jail for over a year, and he said that this show and his holy book helped him keep his sanity during that time. After he was convicted in a very unfair FBI sting operation. He's a Kurdish refugee from Iraq. He came here expecting to find freedom, but because he had been outspoken about the war and about Palestinian rights, he was investigated. They couldn't really find anything, so they were still suspicious of him. They set him up in this sting operation, and he was convicted. It's a long story. I won't go into all of that, but it was terribly unfair. And after he was sentenced to 15 years, he was taken to the CMU in Terre Haute, and that was in May of 2007. And he wrote about it, which is on his website, YassinAref.com. He wrote about it called Dead Life in a Political Prison, and he described the life there, which one of the worst parts for him is not being able to have contact visits with his family, with his wife and 4 young children, which they can't even hardly get there anyway because it's so far away. They've only been there once in that 2 years. And when they did go, I went with them, and there was this tiny little room that they had to be in. I got to have a contact visit as his attorney, but they really needed to be able to hug him. His baby, his other children, his wife had to visit through glass with the phone. And so that's probably the hardest part for him, and just not being able to support his family, of course. But the CMUs, when they were first set up, the way prison units are usually set up is they're regulated in the Code of Federal Regulations, and under the Administrative Procedures Act. They usually request public comment with setting up something new like this, and they actually did that in 2006. They had proposed regulations, codified CFR proposed regulations, and they asked for comment, and the ACLU and other groups showed that these proposed rules would be unconstitutional, discriminatory, and restricting communications with the media, restricting the contact visits. Well, a lot of this stuff would be unconstitutional. And then the Bureau of Prisons said, okay, we won't do it. Well, then at the end of 2006, they did it anyway, but they didn't codify it. The institution supplement they published, instead of citing to the regulations that they would normally do, they just say, according to national policy, they're doing this. And I do think it's illegal.
I'm looking at Yassin Aref's piece called Dead Life, where he says, to me, it's clear the government separated us out and put us here for these reasons. Most of the people here are victims of the government who targeted them and set them up. Then during the prosecution, they claim these people are dangerous, that they intend to harm Americans and would support terrorists. So now, to keep the charade going, they must open a special unit and claim we are too dangerous to be in general population.
Yeah,
Kathy Manley.
That's something that at first, when we were working on Yassin's case, we thought he was the only one that was innocent and convicted unfairly, and then we started looking into other cases, and we realized that there's a lot of other people in his situation who are either completely innocent or way overcharged, where there was some kind of vendetta against them, mostly Muslim men. And Yassin, he wrote a book about his life, Son of Mountains. He wrote that piece you were talking about. Also, the reason that they said that they put him in the CMU, the reason they gave is because they said he had communicated with a terrorist group called JEM, and that's just a complete lie. There was a sting operation. There was no actual communication with JEM. The FBI informant pretended to be in communication with JEM. He wasn't even in communication with this group. And Yassin said he could never support that group. He didn't know enough about it. He wouldn't support it. And then they actually claimed that that was why they put him in the CMU. And
Dr. Rafiel Darfir, his situation, who he is?
Yeah, he's an oncologist from Syracuse, New York, who was also convicted very unfairly. He was convicted of violating the sanctions against Iraq under Saddam, by sending money to charity there to help children, called Save the Needy. And they didn't even accuse him of anything to do with terrorism. And he was the only person convicted of violating these sanctions. And for some reason, they put him at the CMU, too. Basically, it's anybody that they're suspicious of their ideas.
Dr. Darif serving a 22-year sentence. This issue of racial and religious profiling, Kathy Manley?
Well, yeah, it's unconstitutional to treat people more restrictively in a prison context because of their race or religion, and they're clearly doing that. I mean, the CMU in Terre Haute was almost 90% Muslim. They just threw in a few non-Muslims. In Marion, I'm not quite sure. Yassine was recently moved to Marion all of a sudden, which is even farther away from his family.